Hey everybody, Ram Dean and Black with you here in our downtown studios. UFC Fight Night went down in Halifax, Nova Scotia this past Sunday. The co-featured bout, the former welterweight champion Johny Hendricks moving up to 185 pounds to take on the former Bellator middleweight champion Hector Lombard. And it seems new life was breathed into Johny Hendricks. He believes he can take on anybody now at 185 pounds. I will tell you, I was actually pretty impressed because the last couple of performances of Johny Hendricks, and considering who he was facing, he looked kind of flat. Here against Hector Lombard, we know how dangerous Lombard is. He can turn your lights out with just one punch. And I like that Johny was slipping and moving and countering and attacking, and he ended up winning this fight. Were you not impressed?
What do you think George St-Pierre would have said about that performance? That's
sure.
a guy who took George to the limit and many believe beat George. And you saw in that fight, that wasn't that guy. But I was really happy for him. You saw, when you see a man face adversity, and then come back and get a win and be that happy, feel good for him. You do. And so if you are his friends or people he trains with or his people that manage and coach him and whatever, you want to encourage him. But you also, where do we go? Do we go to reality, which is, dude, seriously, think you can fight like Yoel Romero? You know, you're a welterweight, my friend. I mean, you are. And Hector was a welterweight there, and he's the only guy anywhere close to your reach and height. Brian Stan was interviewing him, and it looked like his little brother. You can't fight. It's great to be pumped. Oh, man, I'm back. You know, middleweight's my thing. You gonna fight Luke Rockhold?
But what options do you have? If I don't fight
Make
Luke Rockhold, I'm going back.
I
did do that, and look what Stephen Wonderboy Thompson did to me. Look at the wars I was in with GSP and Robbie Lawler. Don't you think that one of the things we were talking about is, you know, the idea of expanding weight classes in mixed martial arts. When we talk about the ladies, right now it's 115 pounds and 135 pounds. We've seen
145
and 145 pounds, but in around there, we've seen fighters that are 135 pounds drop to 115 pounds, but they should be fighting at 125 pounds, a division that doesn't exist. Between 170 and 185 on paper, not to mention the night of the fight, that's a drastic difference. Johny Hendricks feels like he's a fighter that could be around that 175, 180 mark.
He's 5'9".
I know.
You know what
I get it.
It's an issue of, to be a professional athlete, there's a lot of things you have to do. And among those things is you have to eat a certain way. And nobody is telling the man to cut to 170. They're telling him to lose weight. We misunderstand weight cutting as this thing that involves dehydrating and carb depletion and all of these things, and it is. And you do that from walking around in the world as a man who's 5'9", 186 pounds. And then you do that. But it's his life, and he can do what he likes. It's just, you know, and maybe there is a whole world of guys getting a little bit older now. You see how big Michael Bisping is?
Yeah, exactly.
Have you seen Michael Bisping? You don't think Mike would like to get in there with a welterweight, a 5'9" welterweight? But you know, maybe there's an older division to be had here. Maybe Matt Hughes comes back and goes, oh, well, if these welterweights are middleweight, I'll be middleweight. Maybe Anderson Silva's a fight you can make with former welterweight champion Johny Hendricks. You know, they're both a little older, but I'm happy to see a guy have a good performance. But these were two welterweights that are getting older, and he had the best performance you could hope for from him. But much like Anderson Silva of a week or 2 weeks earlier, we shouldn't all be like, man, it's the old Anderson Silva. It's a 41-year-old who had a really great performance. You should be happy.
So do you believe if you're Johny Hendricks, what are you doing? Are you trying to get interesting fights that is going to be competitive for you, or are you looking for the biggest fights? Because if I look at Johny Hendricks' past, Johny Hendricks would fight the best fighters on the planet. We've seen it. Carlos Condit, George St-Pierre, Robbie Lawler. He's faced them all. So now at this stage of his career, 185 pounds, are you trying to take the most dangerous fights, or are you trying to take fights that you might be able to win, but you might lose the fight, and you're going to get the most money humanly possible?
You're going to lose fights to enormous dudes who are smashing up your body and your organs and your skeleton in ways that you've never experienced before. Nate Marquardt would be a great fight.
Sure.
We got legends like that. Marquardt was a welterweight. He's a bit of a bigger guy, but he's reaching the end of his career. But if you're Johny Hendricks and you're saying, I'm going to be one of those guys, I'm later in my career, so I will fight up a weight class, and I'll take fights like this, that makes sense. bless him. Good for him, man. Go live your life. If you're thinking to yourself, I want to have 5 more, 7 more great fights, I want to fight for a title again, you know, look at Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman, Yoel Romero, Jacare, Gegard, Mike Bisping. Like, look at these guys. You can't fight those guys.
Kelvin Gastelum, who already beat you
Kelvin
at 70.
Gastelum's also not a middleweight, but he already beat Johnny, and the jury's still out, and he's ultra mega talented and still getting better. And young. So, anyways, happy for Johny Hendricks. This is a guy who's been a world champion. He's got the raw end of the stick from all kinds of people. I called him a fat jerk once, I think, because he missed weight. You know, people have given this guy the raw end of the stick. So happy to see him have a great performance and be back on a roll, looking for another win. But the idea of him fighting Luke Rockhold terrifies me.
Oh, God.
You know, he's 5'9".
I'm sure he doesn't
Have
care,
you
though.
seen Luke Rockhold?
I know. I've seen both of them. I've interviewed both guys. Luke Rockhold is absolutely enormous. But it's, you know, I'm not surprised. I really thought that Kelvin Gastelum would have a hell of a time with Tim Kennedy. And you were backstage. You saw how Tim Kennedy was taken out of the venue.
Tim Kennedy, like they carried him out. Calvin just beat the crap out of that guy. But that's an ultra-talented, young, still getting better guy. Johny Hendricks was a guy who had the best performance we've seen since his championship time, but nowhere near the performances he had against those other legends, guys like himself, other greats at welterweight. Nowhere near those performances. Nowhere near the fights that he had with Robbie Lawler. That performance was nothing like the fight he had with Carlos Condit. It was nothing like it. But it was a great performance from a guy. If we say, hey, it's okay, man, you have 3 or 4 fights, fight guys like Nate and
Vitor Belfort, perhaps.
That's a really cool fight. Fights like that, older guys, sure. But you want to fight Kelvin Gastelum again, and we're still not sure he should be a middleweight, and the guy's ultra talented.
Hector Lombard, what do you take away from his performance on Sunday night? And do you believe he'll move back down to 170 pounds, or is he going to do the same thing as you know, some of these older guys? You know, let's just take fights against the Nate Marquards, the Vitor Belforts of the world.
Maybe so, and maybe there's enough of them that they can fight a few fights against each other. It was an interesting one with Hector. This is a time of real change in fighting philosophies and training styles and competing concepts and stuff, real change. And one of those questions that's out there is, can we actually teach an old dog new tricks? If we've got a Vitor Belfort or a Hector Lombard, what are the similarities? Hyper-aggression, they'll destroy you.
Genetically gifted.
Genetically gifted, well, genetically, sure. They'll destroy you. And if they don't, the fight will get easier for you. That idea goes back to Kevin Randleman and even before. This has been a fighting style that it worked. But once you get guys that are later in their 30s, like Hector or Vitor, can we go back and say, maybe we should make him more patient? Because yes, that'll make us better later, but it makes us worse early. So Hector expressed that style of fight, a patient fight instead of a hyper-aggressive Vitor Belfort Hector style of fight, and he did not win. But he was better in the later rounds.
Fine-tuning then?
So maybe. I mean, it's hard to change, but change is good. And I think the result was very good for him. If he, you know, tough to say. It depends. Does he have 4 or 5 more years of fighting left in him? If so, stay this course. Become a new Hector Lombard. I thought he fought really well.
Johny Hendricks, the former welterweight champion, got the decision victory against the former Bellator champion Hector Lombard at UFC Fight Night in Halifax.